The autumn wind cut through the Colorado Territory like a blade, carrying with it the promise of a harsh winter ahead. Sam Mackenzie pulled his worn hat lower over his weathered face as he guided his horse along the narrow mountain trail. The year was 1876, and Sam was nothing more than a drifter, a man with calloused hands, a kind heart, and not much else to his name. What Sam didn't know, as he rode toward what seemed like just another lonely night, was that he was about to make a choice that would change not only his life, but the lives of hundreds of others. A choice that would prove that sometimes the smallest acts can echo through the mountains. Sam had been riding for 3 days, his last decent meal, nothing more. His horse, a faithful chestnut mare named Copper, was just as tired and hungry. The trail ahead seemed endless, winding through pine forests that grew thicker and more ominous with each passing hour. As the sun began to set behind the towering peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sam spotted something that made him pull Copper to a halt. There, barely visible among the shadows of the trees, was a small figure hunched against the base of a massive. Sam dismounted carefully, his hand instinctively moving to the worn handle of his revolver, not out of aggression, but out of caution, born from years of frontier life. As he approached, he realized the figure was a young Native American girl, no more than it. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her small frame shaking cold, and what Sam quickly recognized, the girl looked up at him with dark eyes that held no fear, only she was clearly near exhaustion, her lips cracked and her cheeks sunken. Sam's heart immediately went out to her, but he hesitated. These were troubled times between the settlers and the native tribe. Many would have ridden past without a second thought, or worse. But Sam Mackenzie was not many men. He was a man who had learned long ago that character was measured not by what you did when others were watching, by what you did when no one would. "Easy there," Sam whispered, slowly kneeling down to her. The girl didn't move, but her eyes followed his every motion. Sam reached into his saddlebags and pulled out his last piece of jerky and a small portion of hardtack, barely enough to keep him going for another day, but it was all he had. The girl's eyes widened slightly when she saw the food. Sam could see the hunger burning in her gaze, but still she didn't reach for it. Years of harsh survival had taught her to be wary of strangers, especially white men. "Please," Sam whispered, his voice barely audible above the evening breeze, "let her eat just once." He found himself praying to whatever force might be listening. He held out the food, making no sudden move. After what felt like eternity, the girl slowly reached out and took the jerky. She devoured it with the desperation of someone who hadn't eaten in days. Sam gave her his water as well, watching as she drank deeply. When she finished, she looked up at him with an expression that cut straight to his soul, gratitude mixed with confusion, as if she couldn't understand why a stranger would show her such kindness. Sam knew he should move on. Winter was coming, and he needed to find shelter and work before the heavy snows arrived. But something about this girl, about this moment, made him pause. In broken English mixed with hand gestures, she managed to communicate that her village was not far away, hidden deeper in the mountain. Against his better judgment, Sam decided to help her get home. He lifted the frail girl onto and began leading the horse. The journey took hours, with Sam stumbling over roots in the growing darkness. As they climbed higher into the mountain, Sam began to see signs of habitation, smoke from cooking fires, the sound of voices carried on the wind. But something felt wrong. The sounds were too chaotic, too filled with what sounded like stress. When they finally reached a clearing overlooking the girl's village, Sam's heart sank. Below them, he could see the remains of what had once been a thriving community. Many of the teepees had been damaged, and the people moved about with the slow, desperate movements of those facing starvation. The girl pointed down toward the village and spoke rapidly in her native tongue. Though Sam couldn't understand her words, her meaning was clear. Her people were dying of hunger. As they made their way down into the village, Sam was struck by the dignity with which the people were suffering. Despite their obvious desperation, they maintained their composure, their pride intact, even in the face of such hardship. The village chief, a man whose age was impossible to determine, but whose eyes held the wisdom of many winters, approached. The little girl spoke quickly to him, occasionally pointing at Sam. The chief listened intently, his weathered face revealing nothing. When the girl finished speaking, the chief turned to Sam. "In careful, measured English," he said, "my granddaughter tells me you shared your food with her when you had little to spare. This is not common among your people." Sam shifted uncomfortably. "She was hungry, sir. Couldn't just ride past." The chief studied him for a long moment. "You gave her food when you yourself were. You brought her home when you could have left her to find her own way. Why?" Sam thought about it. He could have given a dozen different answers, but only one felt true. Because it was the right thing to do. The chief nodded slowly. "You speak simply, but your actions show the content of your heart. I am called Standing Bear. This village has seen many hardships this season. The hunting has been poor, and the winter promises to be cruel." Sam looked around at the faces watching, men, women, and children, all bearing the marks of hunger. He thought of his own meager supplies, knowing they wouldn't make much difference to so many people. But then he remembered. "Standing Bear," Sam said. "I don't have much, but I know where there might be help. 3 days south of here there's a supply depot. Military supplies meant for the fort further west. They've got food stores." Standing Bear's expression did, but Sam could see the spark of interest in his eye. "And you would tell us this because people shouldn't starve when there's food to be had." What Sam didn't tell Standing Bear was that he knew the depot was lightly guarded and that he had originally planned to appropriate some supplies for himself. Now, faced with an entire village of hungry people, his own needs seemed insignificant. Standing Bear called together the village council, and they spoke in hushed tones for several minutes. Finally, the chief turned back to Sam. "If what you say is true, this could save many lives, but winter is coming quickly. We would need to act soon." "I'll guide you there," Sam offered. "I know the way, and I know the guard's schedule." Standing Bear studied him again. "You would risk for people you do not know?" Sam thought of the little girl, of her hollow cheeks, and grateful. "I've got nowhere else." The next morning Sam found himself leading a small group of the village's strongest men toward the supply depot. The journey was treacherous, made more difficult by the need to move quietly and avoid main trail. But Sam's knowledge of the terrain proved invaluable. When they reached the depot, Sam's plan proved sound. The facility was indeed lightly guarded, with only 2 soldiers. More important, it was stocked with enough supplies to feed the village through the winter: flour, preserved meat, blankets, and even some medicals. The operation was swift and silent. The guards were quietly subdued without serious harm, and the supplies were loaded onto the horses and travois they had brought. By dawn, they were already making their way back to the village, but their troubles were far from over. As they traveled back through the mountains, they were spotted by cavalry patrol. The soldiers, seeing a group of Native Americans with military supplies, immediately assumed the worst. The confrontation that followed was tense and potentially deadly. The cavalry captain, a young officer eager to make his mark, demanded the return of the supplies and the immediate surrender of the entire group. It was then that Sam made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He rode forward, placing himself between the captain and the Native American. "Captain," Sam called out, "these people aren't thieves. They're starving, and I led them to those supplies." The captain's eyes narrowed. "You're admitting to the theft of military property?" "I'm admitting to preventing people from dying of hunger. Those supplies were sitting in that depot while entire families were wasting away. Sometimes doing what's right means breaking with." The standoff stretched on for what felt like hours. Sam could feel the tension building, could see the soldiers' hands moving toward their weapons. He knew that one wrong word, one sudden movement, could lead to a confrontation, would leave people hurt or worse. Then, to everyone's surprise, the captain slowly raised his hand, signaling his men to lower their weapons. "I can't officially sanction what you've done, but I can look the other way for 10 minutes. I suggest you use that time wisely." As the cavalry patrol rode away, Sam realized that the captain, despite his youth and rigid training, had seen the humanity in their situation. It was a reminder that kindness and understanding could be found in the most unexpected places. The journey back to the village was filled with celebration. The men who had accompanied Sam sang songs of gratitude, and even the usually stoic Standing Bear seemed moved by what they had accomplished. But the real celebration came when they arrived at the village. The sight of the supplies brought tears to the eyes of mothers who had watched their children grow thin with hunger. Elders who had resigned themselves to a final harsh winter suddenly began making plans for spring. That night, the village held a feast, not a large one, for they still needed to conserve their newfound resources, but a joyful one nonetheless. Sam found himself seated next to Standing Bear, listening to stories of the tribe's history and their connection to thee. You have given us more than food, standing as they watched children play by the firelight. You have given us hope. Sam felt embarrassed by the praise. I just did what anyone should have done. But not what anyone would have done, Standing Bear corrected. That makes all the difference. As the evening wore on, Sam began to think about leaving. Winter was still coming, and he needed to find work and shelter for himself. He had done what he could for these people, but his own survival still demanded attention. The next morning, he began preparing to leave. He had said his goodbyes and was loading his gear onto Copper when Standing Bear approached. Where will you go? Sam shrugged. South, maybe find work on a ranch before the snow gets too deep. Standing Bear nodded thoughtfully. Travel safely, Samuel Mackenzie. Your kindness will not be forgotten. Sam mounted Copper and rode away from the village, carrying with him the memory of grateful faces and the knowledge that he had made a difference in the world, even if just for a few people in a remote mountain. Winter came early and hard that year, just as everyone had predicted. Sam found work on a ranch in the lower valleys, spending the cold months tending cattle and mending. It was hard work, but it provided shelter and regular meals. As spring arrived and the snows began to melt, Sam decided to head west toward California. He had heard there were opportunities there for a man with his skills, and the idea of a fresh start appealed to him. His route took him through the same mountain passes where he had encountered the little girl months before. He found himself wondering how Standing Bear's people had fared during the winter, hoping that the supplies had been enough to see them through. As he rode through a narrow canyon, Sam noticed something that made him slow Copper to a cautious. There were fresh tracks in the mud, many horses, all moving in the same direction. The tracks were recent, probably no more than a day old. Sam's frontier instincts told him to be careful. A large group of riders in these remote mountains could mean trouble. Bandits, soldiers, or worse. He decided to leave the main trail and take a longer route around whatever group had passed this way. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Sam tried to navigate around this rider, he found him trapped. The narrow canyon walls both sides and the alternative trails proved to be impassable due to recent rock slides. As he rounded a bend in the canyon, Sam's heart nearly stopped. Ahead of him, blocking the entire width of the passage, were nearly 200 mounted Native American warriors. They sat their horses in perfect silence, their faces painted for what could only be war. Sam's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, but he realized immediately how futile that would be. Even if he could somehow fight his way out, which was impossible, these weren't random raiders. They were organized, disciplined, and had obviously been waiting for him. As Sam sat frozen on Copper, unsure whether to advance or retreat, one of the warriors rode forward. The man was tall and proud, with the bearing of a chief or war leader. He approached Sam slowly, stopping just a few feet away. "Samuel Mackenzie," the warrior said in clear English. "We have been waiting for you." Sam's mind. How did they know his name? How had they known he would be traveling? And most importantly, what did they want? "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage," Sam said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You know my name, but I don't know yours." The warrior smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both fierce and friendly. "I am Swift Eagle, war chief of the mountain tribes, and we know your name because our friend Standing Bear has told us much about you." Understanding began to dawn on. These weren't random warriors. They were from multiple tribes, united for some common purpose, and somehow that purpose involved him. "Standing Bear sent you?" Sam asked, his confusion evident. "In a way. Word of your kindness spread among all the tribes of these mountains. How you shared your food, starving, how you led our people to the supplies they needed to survive the winter. How you risked your own safety to help those who had no claim on your loyalty." Sam shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "I just did what seemed right at the time." "Yes, Swifty, that is exactly why we are here." The war chief gestured to the assembled warrior behind him. "These men represent 7 different tribes. For generations our peoples have feuded with, fighting over hunting ground and ancient grievances. But your example has shown us something important." Sam listened, still not understanding where this was. If a white stranger could show such kindness to a native child, if he could risk his own safety for people not of his blood, then perhaps we could show the same kind. "Your actions shamed us in remembering what we had forgotten, that we are all human beings sharing the same earth." Swift Eagle paused, sink in, continuing. "This winter, instead of raiding each other's camps, we shared resources. Instead of fighting over territory, We helped each other hunt. For the first time in living memory, all 7 tribes survived the winter without losing a single person to hunger. Sam felt overwhelmed by this revelation. I had no idea. How could you? Swift Eagles, you performed a simple act of kindness and rode away, thinking nothing. But kindness, like a stone thrown in still water, creates ripples that spread far beyond what the war chief turned to address the assembled warriors. At his signal, they all dismounted and began forming a large circle. For a moment, Sam's instinct in. He tensed, unsure of their intention. But Swift Eagle quickly put his fears. We have come to honor you, Samuel Mackenzie, to show you that your kindness turned 100-fold. From their saddlebags, the warriors began producing gifts, beautifully crafted weapons, warm blankets, bags of food, and pieces of jewelry. Each item was placed carefully on the ground in front of Sam, creating a growing pile of treasure. But the gifts were only the beginning. Swift Eagle explained that the 7 tribes decided to name Sam as an honorary chief, a brother to all their people. More practically, they had also decided to grant him safe passage through any of their territories for the rest of it. Furthermore, Swifty continued, we have spoken with many of the white settlements, these mountains. Word of your character has reached their ears as well. There is a ranch owner named Harrison in the valley to the west. He has heard our stories and wishes to offer you a position managing his entire operation. Sam, stunned. The ranch Swift Eagle described was one of the largest in the territory, and the position being offered was far beyond anything he had ever imagined himself. I don't understand, Sam said quietly. How did all of this happen? Swift Eagle's expression grew serious. In these times of conflict between our peoples, acts of genuine kindness are rare and precious. When they occur, they must be celebrated and protected, for they show us the path toward a better future. The war chief gestures around them. These lands have seen too much hatred and bloodshed, but they have also witnessed your compassion, and that gives us hope. Perhaps, if more people could follow your example, there could be peace between all people. As the ceremony continued, Sam found himself thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. It had all started with a simple decision to share his last piece of jerky with a hungry child. That small act had grown and spread, touching lives in ways he never could have imagined. Standing Bear himself appeared, having traveled with the warriors to witness. The old chief approached Sam, tears in his eyes. My granddaughter, the child you fed that night, she has grown strong and healthy through the winter, Standing Bear said. Every day she tells the story of the kind cowboy who shared his food when he had little to spare. She has inspired other children to show kindness to strangers, and those children have grown into adults who remember that lesson. Sam looked around at the faces surrounding him, warriors from different tribes who had put aside ancient feuds, all because they had been inspired by a simple act of human decency. The weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. I don't know if I deserve all this, Sam admitted. That, said Swift Eagle with a knowing smile, is exactly why you do deserve it. Only a truly good man would question whether he deserves recognition for his goodness. As the sun began to set behind the mountain peaks, the warriors prepared to depart. But before they left, they had one final surprise for Sam. From among their number stepped a young woman, the same girl Sam had helped all those months ago, now grown taller and stronger. She approached Sam shyly, carrying a small bundle wrapped in soft deerskin. For you, she said in careful English, to remember. Sam unwrapped the bundle to find a beautiful necklace made of carved bone and turquoise stones. But more precious than the craftsmanship was the small wooden carving attached to it, a tiny figure of a man on horseback sharing food with a child. My grandfather taught me to carve, the girl explained. I made this to show my children someday, so they will know about the cowboy who was kind to a stranger. As the warriors mounted their horses and prepared to leave, Swift Eagle offered Sam one final piece of wisdom. Remember, Samuel Mackenzie, that every action we take echoes through time. Choose kindness whenever possible, for you never know how far those echoes will. Sam watched as the 200 warriors rode away into the growing darkness, their torches creating a river of light flowing through the mountain path. He sat alone in the canyon for a long time afterward, trying to process everything that had happened. When he finally mounted Copper and began riding toward his new life, Sam carried with him more than just the material gifts he had received. He carried the knowledge that goodness, even in its smallest forms, has the power to transform the world. The ranch job waiting for him in the Western Valley was indeed everything Swift Eagle had promised. Harrison, the owner, proved to be a fair and generous employer who had been genuinely moved by the stories of Sam's character. Under Sam's management, the ranch prospered, and he was able to build a comfortable life for himself. But more importantly, Sam never forgot the lesson he had learned in those mountains. He made it a point to help travelers in need, to offer employment to those down on their luck, and to treat everyone he met with the same kindness he had shown to a hungry child on a mountain trail. Years later, when Sam had become a respected rancher in his own right, he would often tell the story of that fateful night to visitors and employees. He would speak of how a simple act of sharing had grown into something far greater than he ever could have imagined. "The thing is," Sam would conclude, "I thought I was just giving a hungry child some food. I had no idea I was starting something that would entire life. That's the thing about you never know where it might." Standing Bear's granddaughter, now a young woman and a leader among her people, would sometimes visit Sam's ranch. She had become a bridge between the white settlers and the native tribe, using her gift for languages and her natural diplomacy to prevent conflict and build understanding. During one such visit, she brought with her a group of children from various tribes. As they sat around Sam's fireplace, she told them the story of the night Cowboy's kindness had changed the course. The lesson, she told the children, is not that we should be kind because we expect rewards. The cowboy didn't help me expecting anything in return. The lesson is that kindness has a power of its own, a power to heal old wounds, to build new friendships, and to make the world a little bit better. One of the white children his hand. "But what if someone is mean to you? Should you still be kind?" The young woman smiled, remembering the same question she had asked her grandfather years before. "Kindness isn't always easy," she admitted. "Sometimes people will take advantage of it or fail to appreciate it. But the alternative, a world without kindness, is much worse." Sam nodded in agreement. "Besides," he added with a twinkle, "you never know when that kindness might come back to you, maybe even with 200 warriors to help it along." The children laughed, but Sam could see in their eyes that they understood the deeper message. Kindness wasn't just about being nice. It was about recognizing the humanity in every person you meet, regardless of their background or circumstances. As the evening wound down and the visitors prepared to leave, Sam found himself standing on his porch, looking up at the star-filled. The mountains where his adventure had begun were visible in the distance, their peaks silhouetted against the night. He thought about all the lives that had been touched one moment of the choice to share his food with a hungry rather than keep. It had seemed like such a small thing at the time, but it had grown into something magnificent. The story of Samuel Mackenzie and his act of kindness became legend in those mountains. It was told around countless campfires, passed down through generations, and served as an inspiration for countless other acts of goodness. And in a world often marked by conflict and hardship, that story served as a reminder of an important truth, that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply choose to be kind to a stranger, because in the end, we never know how far the echoes of our kindness might travel, or how many lives might touch along the way. The cowboy who had whispered a prayer for a hungry child had learned that kindness, like love, multiplies when it is shared, and in the process, he had discovered that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with grand gestures or heroic deeds, but with the simple decision to care about another human being. As Sam finally turned to go inside, he touched the carved necklace he still wore after all these years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to make a difference in someone, and thanks to the lesson learned on a mountain trail so long ago, he would be ready to meet them with an open heart, for that is the true power of kindness. It not only changes the lives of those who receive it, but transforms the hearts of those who give it, creating a cycle of goodness that can last for generations.